So what we have discussed in the last lecture is we started with the introduction and we discussed about basics of Java. We discussed how we can say concatenate a string and how we can add up two numbers and say integer numbers. Now let us discuss something that we would need in future and we would be needing it every time whenever we are stuck somewhere. Okay. So first of all, let me do something. Let me just create a new project. Right click over here on the screen, go to new Java project, and I'll be naming this as day 2. So day 2, right? Now over here, what you have to do is that you just need to click on finish button. If you want to make some changes, then you can go to next. Otherwise, you can simply click on finish button. Okay, so this project has been created. Now what I'll do right now is, say instead of copying it, I'll close this project. We don't need the first project now. So I'll right click over it and I can close this. So we don't be seeing the code for that. We'll only see the code for day 2 only right now. So here in day 2, what we would be doing is we would be creating a new file, and that would be a class file, and I'll name this as say debugging basics. Okay. So what we would be doing over here in this part is we would be debugging the code. So suppose we have few things in our code. First of all, we need the main method. So the shortcut is this, that is main. Just type in main and hit control space. It would type in the function automatically for you. Now the next thing is you need to start writing few things. So let us just do one thing. Let us declare few variables. So say integer a equals to say 50. Okay. Then integer b equals to say 2, right? Now what I'll do is that I'll have an integer c. So integer c equals to a divided by b, right? Now if I print c, then it would be printing the say division. So say system.out.println, and I can print C directly. If I run this, you can see that I'm able to see these things, that it is directly printing this. Or what I can do is that I can print in A and B as well. So say system.out.println and say A equals to say A. Okay, A is this, and in the same way I would be printing B as well. So say system.out.println and say b equals to this, that is b, and in the end we would be printing c. So say c equals to, just a second, yeah, c equals to a divided by b, and which is say this, that is c, right? Now I'm running it once again, but we have few things printed over here. A is having a value 50, B is having a value 22, and C is equal to A divided B, which is 25, right? I can use the equal to marks as well rather than using say colon marks. And let me just change them. Now what we would be doing over here is I would be making a little bit change which would be causing us a little bit trouble. Okay, so let me just show you something. So this is this. Now I'll change the value of b. So right now b is 2, I'll change it to 0, right? Now if I run this code, it is throwing me an exception. Okay, so it is throwing an error. And what is the error? So whenever the code has say caught an error, it gives you the say output like this, that is, and it stops the code execution as well. So over here it is giving us an exception in the thread main, and the error is this, that is java dot lang arithmetic exception, and the description is this, that is divide by 0. So we are trying to divide by 0, which is not possible, right? So over here it is immediately throwing us an exception. Now how would we see, right now we know that b is having this value. What if we have a large piece of code and we don't know what value b is carrying, right? Now how would we be able to say see the things, how what variable is carrying what value, and how say we would be able to analyze the code? Okay, now we have a thing in say eclipse, which is debugging, which allows us to remove the bugs from the code. Bugs are the errors in the code which we don't know actually that there is some logical error. Okay, errors are of two types. First is the normal error, that is code typing error. For example, I missed this semicolon, so it is showing me the error immediately. Okay, this is a syntax error. Now the error over here is this, that is I'm trying to divide a by a number by 0, right? So this is a logical error. Now it won't be shown to us directly via Eclipse, but we can see these, say we can analyze these things as well, right? Now before starting to debug, let me show you something, that is the perspectives. So this is one view you can see. Now we have another view as well which is related to debugging. So if I click on this particular button, it would show me the perspective, that which perspective I would want to open. This is my Java perspective, which is default. Apart from that, we have this perspective as well, that is debug. Now what debugging is, it allows us to pause the code anytime we would want to pause it, and it would pause the execution until or unless we say push it forward, right? Now in this particular view, what is extra over here is, this is common, this is the project explorer is common, but over here we have another tab which is the debug tab, which lets us know that the code has paused or terminated, and the console is common. But over here we have the variables tab. Now in this variables, we would be able to see all the variables which are specified till that particular point of code execution and what values they're carrying. And say the next thing is breakpoints. Now the first question that would come into mind is, what are breakpoints, right? So breakpoints are something that is, say, which allow you to pause the code wherever you would want to. Now how would you be able to add a breakpoint? This is pretty easy. Suppose I would want to put a breakpoint over here on the fourth line, so I'll just double click over it. As you can see that there is a blue button over here, this is a breakpoint. Okay, you have other options as well, that is, you can see that over here you can toggle a breakpoint, which is this, right click over the line and click on this toggle breakpoint. So I'm enabling the breakpoint right now. So we have this breakpoint over here. Now usually what we do is that we run the code like this. Okay, now we won't be running the code with this particular button. We would be using another button, which is this button, that is a button with a bug made on it, right? Now what is the benefit of this button? This would allow the code to be paused whenever we have a breakpoint. So if you notice over here, I've executed my code, but it is not printing anything, and it is paused immediately. Now you can see that the line is highlighted, right? Right now there are no variables, so that is why you can see that it is empty. Now to move to the next line, what we have to do is that we need to click one of the buttons. Okay, so which are the buttons? So this is the button, that is step over. Okay, you need to hit F6 on your keyboard. So F6, and you can see that it is moving the code, cursor to the next line. Now as it has executed the first line, that is the fourth line, so over here we have a variable a which has the value 50, right? Now suppose you have hundreds of variables over here, you're not able to track down the variable, but you are able to track down one thing, that is, you're currently on the code, so you are able to see the variables used over here, right? So I'm using a. If I highlight this, you can see that it is showing me the value of a is 50, right? Now wherever a is used right now, it would be showing me the current value of a. It won't be showing me the value that would be at that particular point, but it is showing me the current value of a, which is 50. You can see that I'm highlighting this a over here, I'm moving my cursor over here, I'm not clicking anything. Okay, and it is providing me the value that is 50. Now I'll hit F6 again, the code would move to the next line, and you can see that over here a it has printed that a equals to 50. Now again I'll hit F6, and now we have the value of b with us as well, which is 0, right? Now over here, the moment I hit F6 again, I'm getting to this particular point, right? Now at this particular point, a is having its value, b is having its value. We are trying to calculate the value of c by using a and b, right? Now the moment I hit F6, the code would stop. and you can see that now the code is throwing. You can see that it is throwing something, and what it is throwing? It is throwing arithmetic exception. So main is returning something right now, which is say main is throwing exception, which is arithmetic exception because we are not able to divide anything by zero. Right now, if I hit F6 again, you can see that it is printing this thing. Right now, over here, how would we be able to see these things as well? Right now, we are done with the say debugging. Now, suppose you're not debugging the code, but still you would want to see where the exception occurred. So there is an option. You can see that after divide by zero, there is a next line that is add debugging basics, which is my class name. Then dot main. Main is my method name. And over here, it is giving me a link debugging basics dot java and 8. That is this line. So over here, I'm making a mistake, right? It is directly moving me to this line, particular line, that there is some issue. Okay. Now this was about debugging of the code. Okay, and how we can debug it and how we can see the things. Now, if you notice over here, what I'll do is that I'll add two breakpoints. So first breakpoint is over here on the fourth line, and the second breakpoint is on the seventh line, and the third one is in the ninth line. Right? Now over here, if I move to this particular tab, you can see all these breakpoints as well. On which particular Java file you have the breakpoint, and on what particular line number you have that breakpoint, and whether it is inside a function or something. So it is showing us everything, right? So whenever you're working with the say class, whenever you're working with the code, you can debug. So the benefit of using debugger is that you'll get to know from where the say problem is coming up. Sometimes what happens is that you have a problem somewhere else and it comes up somewhere else, right? So with the help of a debugger, you'll get to know. So right now, say this was about debugging. Now, what if you have a problem and you would want the code to be executed after that problem as well? Okay, so suppose we have this line of code that is int d equals to a multiplied by b. Okay, now there wouldn't be any issue. We can print d as well. So system dot println and d equals to a multiplied by b, and say equals to then the value d. Right now, if I run it, the code won't reach, the executor won't reach this particular line. The reason is that exception is coming out at this particular point of line. Now, what if you know that there would be some exception, okay, but you don't want your code to stop executing, right? So how would you be able to handle this situation? So in this situation, what you can do is that you can use something that is try catch block. Now, whatever code you say you're unsure about, which might throw in an exception, you can put that particular line, say part of code over here. Okay, so I'm putting this part of code over here. Now, right now you can see that say I'm having an option that is catch exception E. Now I can use this exception right now, or I can just keep it blank right now. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll move this code, I'll remove this code now, and we have this code. Now if you see that I'm running this code, A is getting printed, B is getting printed, C is throwing in an exception, so it is not getting printed, but D is getting printed. D is having a value 0. Right now we have got the exception, but that did not stop the execution of the code. So what happened is that tried the code, it failed, and it immediately caught that exception, but it did not stop the code from executing. Now we have the exception which is stored in say variable E, so we can use this, we can print this data as well. So say system.out.println, and I can print E. Okay, I can do this thing as well. You can see that I'm running this and it is printing me this, that is java.lang arithmetic exception divide by 0. Or else we can do something else, that is e dot print stack trace. Okay, so it would be printing the stack trace as well. So if I run this, you can see that it is showing me the exception like this. Now it is showing me the exception over here, but in the end it is showing me that where it has caused. So it has been caused at line number 9. So this is the little bit difference with this exception handling. The reason is that the benefit is that it doesn't stop your code from executing. Okay. Now over here you have something else as well. So you have a try catch block, but in try catch block you have something else, that is say finally. So say finally, and say in this block, suppose you have some code, you would want to try something, and if that failed, you would want to try say run something else as well. So say I would want to run that printing system.out.println, and say you would want to print something. Say I'm printing a demarcation line. Okay, so I'm printing this thing. So you can see that this would be executed normally, right? A demarcation line is getting printed. So suppose you have some code, you've say you've covered all the code inside this try catch thing, and you would want something to be executed after this. Okay, after that try, then you can keep that code over here, right? Now this is how you can handle the situation wherever you are facing some issue, and say you can print in something else over here as well. So in the catch block, suppose you don't want to print the stack trace, instead you would want to print in something, and let me just remove this finally block over here. Okay, or let me just do one thing, let me just have it, but I'll comment it out from this particular point, say /star, right? And I'll have it commented out till that this point. So backslash, sorry, star backslash /. So this is how I can comment it out. Now over here, I would be printing something else, the custom error I would want to print. So say calculation of calculation failed, not calculation of, say I'm just printing a simple thing, that is calculation failed, right? Now if I run this, you can see that it would be printing calculation failed. So whatever custom error code you would want to provide, custom error message you would want to provide, you can provide. Now, if there is no exception, say it is 10. Now there won't be any exception. So this would be running absolutely fine. And this is not getting printed as well. So this would be executed only in that case whenever there is some issue in the try part. Okay. So this is how we can handle the say problems in our code. This is how we can say handle the situations wherever our code is stopping, but we don't want the code to be stopped, right? Now we are into this debugging perspective. Now we would want to go back to the normal perspective. How would we be able to do that? Right now we have this option over here. That is this. We can click on this button, but sometimes due to something, some issue, you're not able to see that button. So no need to worry. You can click on this window button. There is an option for perspective. Then there is an option for open perspective. Here you can choose Java. Even Java is not showing over here. Then you can click on other, and here Java is shown. So this is the default perspective. Click on open and you're done. Right. Now coming back to our syllabus. So we are done with this. That is the say debugging part. Now the next thing is, if you remember yesterday we downloaded Selenium jars, right? So that file was downloaded over here. If I show you something, so this was the file which was downloaded, right? Now here in this file there are so many files. So what are these files? Okay, and you would notice that there is an extension jar. Now what is a jar extension, right? So jar extension is something that is, say, just a second, there is an issue with my software. Okay, so jar. Okay, and let me try it over here once again if it works. Yeah, it's working. So jar, right? As the name says jar, so this is the short form of something. What is the short full form? So that is Java archived resource. Okay. So this is the full form, and what this means is that suppose you have this project, right? Which project? This particular project. So you can see, you can create a jar of this. So whatever classes you would have, not this particular file, the file that I showed you earlier. Let me just go to this particular project's properties and open here, right? So you can see that in the bin directory there are some class files. So what jar will do is it will collect all the class files and it will keep all those class files in a single file, which would be a compressed file. And that you can say it can be compressed, it cannot be, say it may be or it may not be compressed, but it is a single file which is comprising all the, say, files which are inside it. Okay, so this is an archive which contains all the class files that you would want to have. Now over here, what we will do is, so we have the Selenium Java with us. Now there are some files. What we'll do, we'll extract all these files somewhere. So I'm extracting the Selenium Java and I'll extract it to a location that is my A drive, and in batches, say, let me just do one thing. Let me just expand it over here, and we have this folder that is batches. Here in this folder, we have this folder that is our July 2019. This is our workspace. I'll create a new folder over here and I'll name this folder as Selenium jars, right? Now over here, the moment I click OK, all the jars would be extracted over there. So let us just go there and see what files are there. So batches, July 2019, Selenium jars, and you can see that there are some jar files. So there are two jar files over here. The jar file that we need is this client combined 3.141.59.jar. We don't need the sources jar until or you need the sources jar file until or unless you would intend to make changes to the Selenium code. Now, our intention is not to make changes to the Selenium code. Our intention is to use that Selenium code, right? Now, the next thing that we would be doing is we would be going inside this libs directory as well, and you can see that there are some dependent jar files which are used by this particular jar file, that is client combined 3.141.59.jar, right? So these are the dependent files. So if you don't have these files, there might be a possibility that this particular file won't execute, right? Now over here we would be doing something, that is we would be using these jar files in our project. Now how would we be able to do that? Let us see that. Now here this is a project, right? Right click over on your project, go to properties, then you have the option Java build path. The moment you go to this, you can see that in Java build path, you have the option for libraries. The moment you click on this particular tab, you have the option of add external jars. So you can add a jar file, right? Now where the jar file is residing, you know the location, that is A drive, batches, right? Then July 2019, and we have the Selenium jars over here. So I'll add this particular jar file. Now, after adding this particular jar file, you need to add other jars as well. So you need to go to this and libs directory and add all these jars files. Now, the moment you added all these jar files, you can see that this would be reflected over here as referenced libraries, right? Now, if you notice over here, all these jar files that we have selected are shown over here. If I expand this client combined 3.141.59, you can see that there are a lot of things, right? Now over here in Firefox, for example, we have a browser Firefox, we have Chrome browser, we have Edge browser, right? So the basic browser that we would be dealing mostly is Chrome and Firefox. So if I expand this, you can see that there are some things, there are some files, and they have the extension .class. This is the same extension that I showed you earlier, right? If you notice over here, we have the extension .class over here in the project one, and in the same way we have the .class extension over here in the project 2 as well. So these are the simple class files, say class files, Java files, which have been converted for the execution format, right? Now over here, you can see that these are the things. Now this is how you can add Selenium jars. Now the next thing is, say the next thing is the concept of classes. So before we start with the concept of Selenium, we need to start with the concept of classes, what classes are, and say how would we be able to handle those things, right? Now over here, for this, let me just consider a concept of a car. Okay. Now say what I'll do, let me just first create a new class over here and I'll name this as car. So suppose we have a class car. In this class, we would be defining few things. Okay. So say what things we would be defining. So suppose in this class, I would want to have a variable which contains the price of the car. Okay. So say int car, and I won't be providing this, the value to this. So I'll just do this thing, that is int car, right? Now in the same way, I would be defining one more variable, which is string name, right? So we have these two variables with us. Now what thing that needs to be done? So suppose, say we would want to have, see, access to these things somewhere else, right? We would want to have access to these values somewhere else, right? Now suppose there is another class. So I'll right click over there in this package or in the source folder and I'll click on new class and I'll name this class as test car and I'll click on finish. Now we have the class test car. What I would be doing over here is I would be doing something which should allow me to, say, have access to the car class over here in test car. If you notice something in car class, we did not have any main method, right? It is empty. Now in the test car, we would be having a main method. So main method over here, and I would be typing in some code. Okay. So what I would be doing over here is, say I would be printing something, and say what I would be printing over here is, say I would want to have something, that is I would want to specify something. So I would want to have the values stored in this particular car class. Now how would we be able to do that? Let us see that. And say I will be, say, initializing the uh, object of this car class. But first let me do one thing. Instead of having these variables, let me show you the concept of constructor. Then we'll move on to this particular part. So I'm commenting this out for some time. And the first question that would come into mind is, what is a constructor, right? Constructor is a variable with the same name as the class name. Sorry, constructor is a function which has the same name as the class name. What happens is that whenever you initialize the class, that particular function gets executed automatically. So over here, if I create a function like this, that is public car, and I don't want to provide in any data over here, I'll just do something. I'll say print out something that is welcome. Okay, so say welcome to your car. Okay. Now over here, I'll do one thing. I'll go back to test car and I'll write in something. I would be, say, trying to initialize my car class. So what I'll do, I'll just type in new car. The moment I provide this code, what this code would be doing is, if I execute this code, you can see that it is printing welcome to your car. If you notice, this was specified over here in this class, right? This was not specified over here in test car, right? Now you might notice one other thing as well, that the code over here in this particular class is formatted, but the code over here in this class is not formatted, right? Now you would want to format your code and you don't want to waste your time. So there is a particular shortcut for this as well, that is Control Shift F, and it would immediately format your code according to it. Okay, according to the way it is getting executed, so that you don't get confused later on. Now over here, as you can see that I specified this particular thing, that is new car. What this was doing is it created a new object of the car class. Okay, so it created a new object, but it was not assigned to some pointer, right? Or you can see that some variable. Now if it is not assigned, we cannot work with it. So what we can do is that we can do something which would allow us to have access to this later on as well. So say we can have the variable defined like this, car. Okay, and I can name this as, say, C equals to new car. Okay, now over here, what is the C? And say, how would you be able to recognize this, right? So C is not a variable actually. C is a object reference which contains the object of the car class which you have created recently, right? So we would be assigning this value. Now we can work with this C. So if you remember over here in car class, we created two variables, that is, say, the car and name. Sorry, int car. I made a mistake. I'll just name this as int price. Okay. Now over here, we can have access to these things. Say if you notice over here, c dot price, we have this variable with us. We can assign a value to this now. So say I can assign a value 1000, right? Now over here in the same way we can have access to the variable, say, name as well. So c dot name, and we can assign a value to this as well and say this is a Toyota, right? Now over here we have assigned the values. We can use these values as well. So how would we be able to access these values? So say I'll access the values like this. So system dot out dot println c dot price and say system dot out dot println and c dot name. Now if I run this code, you can see that this is printing these things. And you can see that, say, welcome to your car, welcome to your car. So this is executing 2 times. So if you notice over here, new car has been mentioned 2 times. So whenever you're mentioning this, it would be creating a new object of the class. So whenever the object is getting created, the default function, which is the constructor, would be called in every time. So if I have this, say, new car with me, say, multiple times, say this much times, I don't know the exact count, right? So if I run this code, you can see that welcome to your car would be printed in this much times, right? This is the exact count we have typed in new car, right? So let me just remove this thing and I'll comment this out, new car. Now, what is the reason I'm commenting this out and why I'm not keeping it? So what happens is that whenever you initialize the object of a class, it immediately blocks some space on the memory. So what space is getting blocked? If you notice over here, we have two variables over here, that is price, which is of type integer, and we have a variable which is of type string, that is a name variable. So string would contain some memory, integer would contain also block some memory. So this memory would be blocked until or unless the execution is stopped. Okay, so if the execution is still going on, then these things would block the memory in your space, say, memory space in your system, right? Now the reason to, say, avoid these things is that the more memory you're wasting, the more slow your application would be, right? Now over here, what we would be doing is, say, we are printing these things. You can see that welcome to your car 1000 Toyota. In the same way, we would be doing something, and let me just change the variable name from C, or you can say that the object reference name from C to C1. Alt Shift R, I can provide in the new value, and you can see that C1, I changed the C1 over here, but it got changed over here, 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 and here, right? Now the next thing, so suppose I have an object of car, say, initialized once, we can initialize the object again as well, right? So say car C2 equals to new car, and over here this is done, right? Now I can do something. I can type in something. Say C2 dot price equals to say 300, and say C2 dot name equals to say uh, Suzuki. Okay. Now over here, if I print in like this, say system dot out dot println and C2 dot price and system dot out dot println. So C2 dot name, right? And before that, what I'll do is that, okay, let me do one thing. Let me just surround this inside the quotes as well. I forgot. And it has not been surrounded inside the quotes. So first thing is done. Now we would want to do something. We would want to have a demarcation line printed as well. So say system.out.println and we would have our demarcation line. So I'm printing in this demarcation line and you can see that I'm printing in two things, right? You can see that welcome to your car is getting printed 1000 Toyota, but in the next object we have the values 300 and Suzuki, right? So these objects are actually acting differently. Okay, these are having their own spaces in memory, right? Now in the same way I can specify the third say object as well, that is car C3 equals to new car, and it is not picking up car over here, so car from this and car here, right? Then C3 dot price equals to 500, and I'll say I'll name this as C3 dot name equals to Hyundai, right? Now over here I can print in these as well. So system dot out dot println SYSO, then C3 dot price, and you can print system dot println and C3 dot name, right? And before that, let me have a demarcation line printed, so I can copy it from here and I can provide it over here directly. And let me just run this code now, and you can see that the moment I execute my code, it would be printing in these things. That is welcome to your car 1000 Toyota, welcome to your car 300 Suzuki, and welcome to your car 500 Hyundai. Right? So these three objects have their different memories in say in your system. Now over here, you can do one thing. That is, suppose you would want to pass on an object to the another object say reference. So how would you be able to do that, right? I'll make a little bit change over here in my code. So what I'll do is that I'll assign something to some other class. For example, I'll assign say C2 equals to C1. Now I'm assigning in something, and let us just see that what is happening over here. So I would be printing in these two things again, right? So over here, I am printing C2. What happened? Control Z, Control Y. We were over here. Why did it got changed? Okay. Now over here, now if I'm printing this, and let me have a demarcation line as well. So I'll have the demarcation line printed over here, and let us go. So if you notice over here, it is printing Toyota again. Okay. Earlier C2 had this object of Suzuki, but what happened? We we removed the object from this, and what we did, we actually provided the object of C1 to C2. So this is having this value. What if I change something, and what if I change from C1 to C3? So it would be having a value of C3, and You can see that over here it is printing in Hyundai now, right? Now, what if I change something in C3 before, say, or C2, right? So say I'm doing something, I'm changing some data over here in this, say C2. So C2 dot price, and I'm updating the price from 500 to 700, right? Now over here, what I'll do is that instead of printing C2 dot price, I would be printing C3 dot price. So I would be printing in over here C3 dot name, right? Now if you notice over here, I'm printing in C3, but I'm making changes in C2, right? So those changes are getting reflected in C3 as well. So both of these references are sharing the same object. Okay, the older object is vanished of C2 and it has been assigned the object of C3. So whatever making changes you make in C2 or C3, those changes would be reflected everywhere. Okay, now over here we notice something, that is in car class we created a function which was a constructor. Now we can overload constructors as well, but first, what is overloading, right? So overloading means that we have a function and say we have something related to it, but we would want to have the same function which would have some different functionality. So we can specify that thing, but there is a trick. The thing is, there is a catch, and the catch is you need to provide some arguments to it. So first of all, the question that would come into mind is what are arguments to a function and how would we be able to handle this situation? This is pretty easy. So I'll be creating another constructor, say public, and say public, and I'll name this as car again. But this time I would be having something, say string, say car name, or you can say the customer name, right? Now over here it would be accepting customer name, and we can print in like this, say system dot 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 println and say welcome, and then we can type in something like this, that is say the customer name, so customer name, right? Now the question that would come into mind is when this customer name would be printed. As you can see that I'm running this, but it is just printing welcome to your car, right? Now what I'll do, I'll just comment out everything here right now, and I'll just keep one thing enabled, that is C1 right now, and the things related to C1 only. So we don't need this part of code right now, so I'm just ignoring it for a while. And over here, if I make a little bit change, I provide some data. So say Abhi. Now, if I run this, you can see that it would be printing welcome Abhi, and it is printing in these things, right? Now, over here, what we are trying to do is we are just overloading the constructors in a way so that we'll get to know that which particular constructor would be called in what situation. So if you're providing in some data over here, then the constructor related to this data would be called, and if you're not providing any data, then the default constructor would be provided in. Okay, now the default constructor is this one, and this is a parameterized constructor. Now this is also a parameterized method as well, or you can say that parameterized function as well, right? As this is a constructor, so you cannot call it in any other way. But if you have the function specified with some other name, then you can call the function directly as well. So for example, over here, I'll create a function, say starting a car. Okay, so public and say void, and I'll name this as say starting, or you can say the start car. Okay, and I would be printing starting car, right? And I can just keep it something like this. Now if I run this, you can see that nothing is getting printed apart from this. Now I'll go back to test car and I can do something. I can call in the method, that is say C1 dot start car, right? Now I've specified this and you can see that this is running and it would be printing starting car, right? Now over here, we would be having one more thing, that is, say we would be having a variable c1 dot wheels. Now every car has wheels, so I can specify this like this, that is c1 wheels equals to 4. Now it is throwing me an, say, syntax error that there is no variable with the name wheels. So what I can do, I can create a field, and this is an integer type, so this has been created automatically. Even if you don't provide public, this thing would be specified public automatically, so I can ignore this as well, right? Now over here every car is having wheels, so what we can do is that we can say specify this thing like this, and we need to uncomment out the whole code now. So I'm uncommenting it out, forward slash, and all the code has been uncommented now, and we can do something, that is we can print and we can use it something like this, that is c2 dot wheels equals to 4, right? And in the same way c3 dot wheels equals to 4, c3 dot wheels equals to 4. Now did you notice something? The value is static, it is not changing, but we have specified it, and the thing is we are wasting some storage, we are wasting some memory, actually not storage, we are wasting some memory because this part of memory would be locked in, right? Now as we have the static value, we can do something in car class, so we can specify something that is static before the initialization of the variable, and just due to this you can see that immediately our code would start throwing an error in the syntax error, and that is, say, it is giving say suggesting me something that is change access to static using car. Now I can access this wheels variable directly as well, car dot wheels. So whenever you have it static variables defined, you can call it like this as well, right? And everywhere you need to change this now. So car dot wheels would be the thing that you need to access. The benefit is that you are saving some memory. Okay, these things would be used, but the thing is this is some static data which has to be used everywhere. Now rather than wasting memory, we can utilize it somewhere else. So what we can do is that we can specify it like this, that is we just have to specify static before it, right? Now in the same way we can have static methods as well. So how would we be able to have public static and say void. Now what is void? Void is a return type, that this means that you're not returning anything, right? Now over here I can have the function, say, I can name this function as, say, Windows. Okay, so Windows, right? And I can have the definition of this as well. So system dot out dot print ln, and I can print in something that is, say, all cars have Windows. Okay, now over here if I go back to test car, we can have access to that particular function like this, that is car dot, say, wheels. Okay, or you can say that car dot windows. Windows is a function. Like all this function, you can see that in the end it would be printing all cars have windows. So you can have this function called in everywhere. So wherever whatever data you specify in a class as static, that won't be consuming a lot of memory. The reason is that it is not related to object. We don't need object to access that particular variable, right? All we have to do is that you need to specify the class name dot the variable name or the function name, right? So this was about the classes. Now coming back to Selenium, as you can see that we have added the jar files of Selenium. Now how would we be able to use these jar files, right? Now over here I'll create a new class, and I'll name this as Selenium basics, right? Here we would be initializing something. That is, we would be initializing the browser. So how would we be able to interact with the browser? First of all, we need the main method. So main method and Control Shift F so that we can format the code over here. Now over here, we need to do something. We need to initialize the driver. So before initializing the driver, let me just do one thing. We need to initialize the object reference. So Chrome driver is the class, right? Which would allow us to interact with the Chrome browser, and I'll name the reference as driver equals to new Chrome driver, and we are done. Right? This would be initializing the Chrome driver. Let us just run this code and see what happens. The moment you try to run this code, it would do something, and you can see that it is opening Chrome browser. Now, why it is opening Chrome browser for me and why it won't be opening Chrome browser for you? Okay, so the reason is that you need to specify something. Right now it is working for me because my system is already configured to use it. Right now, what you have to do is that you have to go to this page, the official web page of Selenium, seleniumhq.org, and over here you need to go to this downloads page. Now on this particular page, what you need to do is that you need to do something. You need to scroll down a bit, and you can see that it has listed out some browsers. Now these are the browsers which are supported by Selenium. Right now, Mozilla Gecko driver is for Firefox browser. Google Chrome driver is for Chrome browser. Opera is having its own drivers. Microsoft Edge is also having drivers. So the browsers that we would be emphasizing on would be these only, that is Google Chrome and Mozilla. We would be using Microsoft Edge as well in some cases, and you can use these browsers as well. But the most commonly used browsers are Mozilla and Google Chrome only. Edge is also being used, but not that much. Right now, if you would want to automate Internet Explorer, which is an obsolete browser which is kind of an obsolete browser, you can scroll up and you can see that for Internet Explorer there is a driver, and you can find it over here. Okay, and if you're using 64-bit version of Windows, then you need to download this one. Otherwise, you need to download this one. Now we need the driver for Chrome browser. So click on this latest version. Now here you would be taken to the page where you can download the drivers. But there is a thing. That is, which version do you need to download? So for this, click on this triple dot, go to help, go to about. Okay, and here it would be showing you the version that you're using. For example, I'm using 75.0.3770. Coming back to this is the version that I'm using. Then I need to download the binaries of this particular version. Okay, so the moment you download it, or you can see that you can click on this link, you can see that we have these three files. So Chrome browser is available in Linux, it is available in Macintosh, and it is available in Windows. So you have the drivers. All you have to do is that you need to download these drivers and you need to extract them somewhere. For example, I've extracted them over here in my system, and I've extracted them over here somewhere, WebDrivers. Right? Now over here we have the Chrome driver. I'm having the Google Firefox driver as well, and I'm having the Internet Explorer driver as well. Keep all these exe files in one place, then copy the path. Now the same thing that we did with Java, environment, and you can see that, say, environment, edit the system environment variables. Here go to environment variables. Here on the bottom part, go to the path variable and add the path. That is like this, that on the path I've added a batches web drivers. If you're using the older version of Windows, then you need to provide the path over here in the ending followed by a semicolon. Right? And if the older path is not having a semicolon after that, then you need to provide the semicolon before the path as well. Right? Once you're done with this, click on OK and OK and restart your Eclipse. Okay, if it doesn't solve and if it gives you some exception and it does not open Chrome browser, then you need to restart your system as well. Once you're done with this, you can see that as I'm running my code, okay, and it would be opening Chrome browser, right? And you can see that browser is opening and it would be opened in a moment. And with the help of my code, I am able to open Chrome browser, right? So this is how you can open browser. Just try this yourself and try opening Firefox and Internet Explorer and Edge browser as well. Okay. So this was for today's lecture. If you have any queries,